One of the things that I have gratitude for being alive alive today is to see the new golden age of reason catapulting humanity and human thought into a new level that most people and Luddites can't fathom where we're going next with technology and philosophy. It's like I compare it to imagine seeing the birth of ancient Greek civilization. Um, Story time. Anybody familiar with Greek mythology? Excuse me if I get this a little bit wrong, but first there was chaos. First there was absolute chaos in the universe. There was no order. It was the universe is neither male or female. It's just this void. Chaos in ancient Greek roughly translates into void. And then we had Eros and a few other. We can describe them as gods, or modern day approach would be they were kind of like feeling sensations, vibrations. As Eros is lust, and then there was Gaia, Mother Earth, the planet, and the planet was getting screwed over, and in the stories raped repeatedly by this chaotic, wild energy on the universe, and so Gaia created the more human deities, the Olympian gods. So the Olympian gods, or energies, or whatever you want to call them, vibrations, ways of thinking, the ones that require more reason and intellect to protect Mother Earth from the forces of the universe that are ultimately going to destroy the planet, because everything in the universe is born and everything is destroyed. And if you look how human beings came into existence, I mean, first of all, obviously there was the void, there was chaos, there was nothing, and we mass randomly accumulated on the planet, and then randomly parts of the mass started to become organized, and boom, we became humans. And let's say the start of civilization starts off with ancient Sumeria. Sumeria. This is my unscripted rant about the golden age of reason. Sumeria, okay, they're the first people to make writing, maths, and astrology reasonably. And let's say they're the people who really invented logic first. But it was Aristotle was the first person to write books on logic. Hence, we call it the golden, or the we call him the godfather of reason. And Greek philosophy in Europe was the beginning of structured thought in Europe. Of course, we say that because they're the people who wrote at that time wrote the most stuff down. So that was kind of the first golden age of reason. And then with the dominance of Christianity having pros and cons, pro being Christians being very good, being organized, con being is that the large Christian groups, particularly the Catholic Church, was holding logic, reason, and development of science down. Then we had the Renaissance, which was a revival of classical thought, and then we had the age of enlightenment, where logic, reason, and science, and mathematics, and astrology became more and more popular in education. So we had like the printing press. If you imagine, at a time when most people didn't have access to education and people didn't know how to read or write, someone with a book is pretty powerful. Like in ancient Irish culture, a poet was considered to have magic powers because someone had control over language, had control over other people's thoughts. Because intelligent people can manipulate less intelligent people quite easily. And so the word lecturer, a university lecturer, is just someone who reads a book, because we didn't have a lot of books back then, and someone with just a book had the information has a lot of power. Then we had the Industrial Revolution, and human beings became better and better and better at producing things. And then we had the Internet Revolution, and we had the dot-com bubble, where of course there was a pile of crazy companies coming out on the internet, but we got Amazon, like, you know, the largest retail company that doesn't have their own shops. We have Google kind of came out of that as well, but it wasn't big at the time. And we have Uber. And we have this new revolution of with a new way of doing business online, where I'm going to say 90% of the people on the planet have the ability to go online and work online and earn income online. And so we no longer have to rely on CVs, knowing the right people, government programs, government handouts. For the majority of people on the planet, I'm going to say 90% of the people on the planet have access to the internet, free education, to study science, IT, and finance. So kind of the point of my rant, the kind of point of this rant, if we're living in a situation where most people, 90%, that number comes from, according to poverty rates. And if you imagine that the standard of poverty is increasing, as time goes by, what we call being impoverished is actually wealthier than the last people that we called impoverished. But that number is actually still increasing, despite that the standard is increasing, but the number is decreasing, if that makes sense. So 10% of the population are struggling to feed themselves. If you compare that to 100 years ago, where most people on the planet are struggling to feed themselves, that's a great feat. So I'm going to say all the people who aren't struggling to feed themselves, which is 90% of the population, most people in Africa actually aren't starving. Most people in Asia are actually educated, and the vast majority of people in Europe and in America and Russia, whatever, and South America have spent a lot of time on the internet and can go onto YouTube and go, you know, I wonder, you know, you can just start learning about science. You can start off learning about science in an entertaining way and watch the entertaining YouTube channels like this one. Like this YouTube channel, this DTube channel, if I'm in DTube. Was it d.tube/response or something like that? This is like an entertaining scientific channel-ish, right? I mean, what I'm saying here isn't like purely scientific, but you know, it's like infotainment kind of thing. You can start off with that. You just kind of get interested in science, and then you can learn science. The amount of tech jobs are going to continuously increase. They will always increase. And so we have this thing called creative destruction. Video didn't kill the radio star. Okay, does a video kill the radio star? It wasn't true. People thought that music videos was going to destroy the entertainment industry. It didn't. It just created a new industry. Yes, television is bigger than radio, but radio is still there and still useful. When cars came out, it didn't eliminate horses altogether. It just meant that there's a new industry. So when we create new, you know, people are worried about robots are going to take our jobs. Yeah, robots are going to take a lot of jobs, but it's going to make humans more productive. And that increased productivity, that surplus, has always gone back and created more jobs and more wealth. If it was true that technology destroyed jobs, like the Luddites believe, then human beings should be getting poorer since the Industrial Revolution. But is in fact we are getting wealthier, and poverty is only fucking 10% of the population. We're getting really good. Like we're eliminating the majority of people on the planet can learn things purely for enjoyment. Purely for enjoyment. And what is the benefit and the benefits of studying science, IT, and finance? Number one, obviously, these are the highest paying jobs. These are the highest paying sector. The jobs that don't require licenses. You don't need a university degree. You can just learn them. If you're good at them and you can prove that you can run a project then who the hell, whose approval do you need? Because we have the internet and we have technology to get around government regulations and control, and all you need is results. You can study finance and trade cryptocurrency. You can study computer programming and build a cryptocurrency. And and if you find those two things difficult and you don't have an aptitude for them, fine. Then you can still have an interest in science and get involved in the marketing, the graphic design, creative content, YouTube, Steam and YouTube, what have you. There will always be space for people. There will always be space for creativity. And the people that just aren't creative and can't be scientific and good at business, these people, if all they want to do in their lives is go to a bar and drink, and their whole point of getting a job is so they can buy alcohol and have a comfortable tomb in the living room, then we just quietly leave those people behind. Those people are getting smaller. The kind of people who just want to watch television and do nothing with their lives, those people getting smaller. And we just leave them. We just leave them be. We don't need to force people to be rationalists. But the point that I'm trying to get, to keep moving off topic, ironically, is that people who study science, logic, maths, computer programming, finance, language becomes structured. Language makes sense. In computer programming language either makes sense and it works, or it does not compute. In artistic language, when people are studying the arts, language doesn't need to make sense. They don't have to, like, the standard for a sociology degree and standard for a physics degree. I mean, like, you cannot compare them. Like, come on. Studying the arts is just reading a book. It made sense that this was really important a few hundred years ago, but nowadays, if you study science, I mean, studying an art is easy. I study both arts and science. I study finance. I mean, on a regular basis, I study finance. I study programming, and I study music. I'm doing like a 7-week blues course. I study classical music. I study traditional music. Blah, 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 study. But my point is that with structured language and structured thought, people are going to think more rationally. And instead of valuing things with just irrelevant values, morality, traditional values, family orientated, religion, political philosophy, oh, the world should be like this, oh, the world should not be like that, and this kind of nonsense. Logic helps us understand how the world ends. Keeping the quote from Star Trek Discovery, logic helps us stay present. By focusing what is, and we let go of our attachment to the way we think things should be, and our resistance to the way things should not be, we become more calm. And if you look at violent murderers, it is very unusual for serial killers to have a scientific background. It does happen. There was a famous shooter, I think the Batman shooter came from a scientific background, but they usually do not come from a science background. It's very unusual. That doesn't mean scientists aren't violent, but scientists tend to be less violent than people who are not scientists. That's just scientists don't go around bullying people as much as people who aren't scientists do. So it's a fact. We look at the biggest mass murderers in the world in history. We look at Hitler, studied architecture, studied the arts. We look at Stalin, was a poet. Before that, he was trained to be a priest. Mao, philosopher. All these people, Mao Zedong, all these people, their problem is that they have an idea in their head that they have the ego that they can design the world to be anything different than it is, instead of having respect for the natural order of things. They want to create something new. While that sounds good and being creative sounds like a good thing, the problem is that when you take someone else and their sovereignty and individuality in their personal space, and you want to design it another way, the only way you can do that is with gulags, with concentration camps, guns, prisons. Okay, and even if you go down to just moderate politicians, most politicians come from a law background or some kind of arts background, or they're a teacher. They usually are not scientists or business people. Why? Because if you have a good idea and you have a good product, you don't need to write a law to enforce your good. You don't need laws to enforce a good idea. If something is a good idea, it will flourish because good economics demands that good ideas flourish. Whereas politics and lawmaking means bad ideas can become mandatory. Like slavery was a bad idea, but it became mandatory. Suppression, whatever. Kind of like pick loads of like the fact that like if you have arthritis, and a lot of people in this world will get arthritis, bad backs as you get older. Like you can take morphine, or you can consume marijuana. Like which is like logic and reason dictates that marijuana is a better option than most painkillers. Yet the structured legal mind says that we shall put people in cages where they're at the threat of being raped for smoking marijuana, but we'll give people morphine-based medicine. I mean, like this doesn't make sense. The majority of the world are in prison for smoking marijuana and prostitution, neither of which cause harm to the people, yet you threaten people with rape because rape and murder and violence is okay if people are doing something you don't want. Like it doesn't make sense. Anyway, the point of my rant is hopefully, and when I say hopefully, as we look at the numbers, when people study logic, science, mathematics, finance, they are more reasonable. They are more reasonable to deal with. We have a common language structure because in the English, for English speaking people who speak the language of science, business, and the arts, and colloquialisms like regional dialects, there are different ways to use the same words, and people who study science tend to have a uniform way of speaking, and it becomes easier. Like science by its nature is decentralized. It doesn't need authority. It doesn't need a university. It doesn't need a government. Science will always flourish because the scientific method at the moment, in the future it could be different, at the moment the scientific method is the best way human beings can work out what is most likely to be true. The scientific method doesn't tell us what is or is not true. It tells us what is most likely to be true, and logic is a little bit different because it does tell us what is true, what is not true. That's the point of logic. However, it is limited based on what we understand what the inputs are. Anyway. So, yeah. So, how can you get involved in the new golden age of reason? I mean, if you're a scientist, then excel and be the best in your science. I'm a computer scientist, so I have to study that every day. And if people who are just kind of don't come from a scientific background, they wouldn't have to get into science. Pick something that you're interested in, a hobby, and look up the science of whatever that is. I mean, I'm into music. If you look up, I mean, I did a course with Duke University, the biology of music, and people do study the science and logic behind music because it makes sense. I know my rant is ironically kind of skewed, but golden age of reason, baby. It's the golden age of reason. If you look at most people who are into cryptocurrency, they tend to be libertarians. They're like borderline anarchists. They tend to be very socially liberal and tolerant of people. And the most important thing is being against war. War is the most pointless activity human beings do. I don't see scientists come together and thinking of a logical reason for supporting war. War is usually an emotional thing. Oh, I have a fear of those brown people over there. Oh, they've got funny hats and beards. Oh, let's bomb them. That's usually the gist of pro-war arguments. Anyway, live free or die trying.